Hello, Saints. We're getting to the heart of the matter of Galatians, what Paul's trying to say to the churches of Galatia who are being deceived by the Judaizers, who told them they had to come through the Jewish system to find Jesus. And he's trying to tell them, no, you don't. So here we are in chapter 5, and we begin with the verse, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, we keep standing firm, and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." Now, for many Christians, evangelicals precisely, they see this freedom as freedom from God's law or obedience, that the law had somehow been done away with. And I've said many times, it's not the law. Law is not the problem. We are. And so what he's talking about freedom here is that it's not through the obligation and jumping through the hoops, but faith in Christ. That was his whole tenor of the letter, was this is what was supplanted. The law there in chapter 3 that was fading away was law written on stone stuck in a box. It was being replaced by the law written on the heart, the new covenant of Jeremiah 31:31 and following, which was a promise not just to the Christians or what would be the church in the future, but was a promise to the Jews of that day. They could have entered into that at that moment. It wasn't just a far-off promise pie in the sky. It was a reality. And the reality came when the King himself came, Jesus Christ. And so the freedom we're talking about is our freedom in Christ, and that we have a way through faith. Remember there those first verses of Romans chapter 8. For what the law could not do, being weak, Christ did. And what it was is that the law is the law, but it had no solution. It couldn't offer a fix for our sinful condition. What he needed was another way, and that was faith in Christ in the work of the cross. That's the whole message. Remember, Jesus says, listen, if you have faith on what I did on the cross, you won't have to die. I'll take the loss. And the loss falls on him. The great exchange. He took our sin and gave us his righteousness. We're not any more righteous than he is a sinner. It's an exchange. It's reckoned. It's what they call substituting. God reckoned Abraham righteous. It was a forensic thing. So that's what we have here. And that's what he's driving home at the beginning of 5. Now he's relating a lot here with what's going on with the bearing the armor in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 12 to the end. And he says, "Behold, I, Paul," this is verse 2, "I, Paul, say to you that if you receive circumcision, Christ will be of no benefit to you." Now he's not just talking about the act of circumcision, but what circumcision meant. It was the sign of the covenant. And that means if you were taking it for that reason, you were falling back to the old covenant. And he says, Christ is no benefit of you if you go back to the old covenant. "And I testify again to every man who receives circumcision that he is under obligation to keep the whole law." So if you go back to that old covenant, you got to keep the whole law. How are you doing? Not very well. That's why we need faith. That's why we need Christ. Now, we're not talking about two covenants. Like I said before, there's really one covenant expressed differently over time, from Abraham, from Mount Sinai, and now to the time of Christ. It's the same law of God, but not on stone in our hearts. So that's the progression of the covenant. So when we talk about the other covenant, we're talking about the other time period when the covenant contract, God's commandments, were played out through the temple rituals. Nowadays, they're not. They're played out through faith in Christ and his work of the cross. So he says, "I testify again to every man who receives circumcision that he is under obligation to keep the whole law. You have been severed from Christ, you who are seeking to be justified by law." He says, "And so you have fallen from grace." So don't allow yourself to be caught up into that cycle. "For we," he says, "through the Spirit, by faith," and this takes us back to Romans chapter 8 again, "are waiting for the hope of righteousness." Now the hope of righteousness isn't a hope that, well, we wish it's true. But hope carries with it this meaning of confidence, of leaning into something, We have confidence in God. This is our hope. And it's not just pie in the sky. So we are waiting for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything, but faith working through love. Faith in what Christ did. Faith in the work of the cross. Faith is not itself a virtue, remember? It's not a virtue in itself. It's just a means by which we are able to lay hold of the promises of God. And even that faith is given to us as a gift. Romans 12:3. God gives us all a measure of faith. And it doesn't take much to believe and say, yes, Lord. So it's God's gift all the way around. And it's by faith, trusting in Jesus. Again, just to hammer this home, He's not calling us that obedience is not necessary. This isn't an optional program. No, we want to obey. And I tell you what, if you truly are converted into Christ, into having Him in your life, you want to obey. That's what drives us. We want to obey, but we know we fall and stumble. We know we err. We can't say we're without sin. We'd be a liar. There's no truth in us. That's 1 John 1:8. But we can trust Him. You know, I've been back in the church now for 26, 27 years. And I have to tell you, I'm not where I was when I came back. I'm a little further down the path. I know that. And that's not Karl. That's Christ in me. And I know that if He can take me this far, with all my problems that I still have, He can take me all the way. I trust Him. In the good times and the bad times. And many of you know I've had a pretty bad year. But I trust Him. Even when I'm falling, I trust Him. Because He'll catch you. Blessings.